Goodfellas, more like good movie. A fair warning that it's really hard to talk about this movie.
Yes.
And that's part of the reason why I just started off with a joke, because I'm like, where do I start with this movie? God knows there's been plenty of podcasts with guys talking about Goodfellas.
That's the thing. I was, it's funny because Airplane you were apprehensive to do for similar reasons that I was apprehensive to do Goodfellas, because it's one of those movies that's very heavily covered. And I was worried. I'm like, is there anything we're going to say about it that people haven't heard a million times?
At the end of the day, I really wanted to talk about Goodfellas with you because it's one of those movies it's one of my favorite movies. And a big part of that is I just like hanging out with these characters.
Yeah.
You know, as weird as that might sound, and maybe it's not that weird, but because they are gangsters, they're bad people, but I love hanging out with them, and we'll get to it, but I know so many small details about the way they behave in this movie that you can only have after watching for a while. But I wanted to talk to you because I know you like this movie, but you don't have the same experience with it.
I don't watch it every year, no. I've actually, the last time I watched it was probably like in college, which was probably 7 years ago or something like that, and that might have been my second time watching it ever.
Yeah, wow, outing your age, man. It's wild.
Not really college. Yeah, I know, I'm getting old, but
I'm just kidding.
The thing is that's funny about it is, you already know this, but I watched it again to watch with my girlfriend, and I just wanted to really...
You watched it again and then you decided to watch it a second time?
Exactly, probably the next day I put it on again. I just really wanted to familiarize myself because I knew you're going to be way more prepared no matter what than I am, because you just watch this movie all the time and you know it like the back of your hand. Mm-hmm. But for me, I just wanted to at least be able to keep up with what you're going to talk about and make sure I know what order we're in, the names of the characters.
Plot.
Yeah, because there's a lot that happens in this movie. There's a lot. There's, and that's what's awesome about it.
Had your girlfriend seen this movie before?
No.
Okay, so what did she think?
Oh, she really liked it. Yeah, the main thing she complimented was the acting, which is of course. She was just saying I don't think there was a single bad actor that entire movie.
Yeah, which is what's crazy is that this movie is a huge ensemble.
Yeah.
And yeah, when you think of it, you think of De Niro, Pesci, and Liotta because they're the Goodfellas. Yeah. They're on the poster. But when you watch the movie, it's this one big ensemble. And by the end of the movie, you know the family. You know everyone.
It's one big world that you're kind of being walked through.
And if actors have someone like a character like Johnny Roastbeef, he probably has 8 lines. But he kills it in that scene where De Niro's getting mad at him for buying the car.
Yeah, that's a great scene. I immediately laugh and I can immediately quote it, and we can probably act it out together on our own for fun. I think the other thing my girlfriend brought up too was she was reflecting on it, was how do they manage to make these kind of psychopathic criminals likable and watchable, mildly sympathetic?
They tackle it in a way where we can all understand, right? We understand what it's like to find a family. Found family for both of us is very important, right? You and I moving to LA, not really knowing many people, and finding friends, finding each other.
Yeah.
And finding brotherhood in each other. A lot of my friends are my family. I mean, because I live so far away, they basically are my family.
Yeah.
And we can all relate to that. So when Henry Hill finds that, we can all attach ourselves. We understand why it's so important for him to be loyal to his people,
And it's the need for power too, which is such a big part of this movie.
Rags to riches.
Yeah, rags to riches, and the way Henry Hill narrates the movie, it feels like you're having a beer with him. And,
okay, yeah.
And he's kind of even if you obviously not even just heavily disagree, that's a funny way to phrase it, but even if you hate the actions that he does, he talks in a way that kind of holds your hand through of yeah, but this seemed pretty cool at the time. And it kind of, at least the beginning of the movie, doesn't show a lot of the really horrible stuff they do. Whenever they're committing their crimes and robberies, it's from a far away camera view a lot of the time. And it's in passing where it's oh, we just stole from little trucks and then we were rich.
Well, there's a true turning point in the movie where it goes from that first fun rise up first half and then the fall second half, right? And there is a true turning point. It's interesting that you said it's having a beer with him, because the way I wrote it is his narration is someone coming off a bad hangover and kind of trying to remember what they did.
Yeah, he's reflecting it from from a casual perspective.
But the bar analogy is better because I can imagine someone at a bar and especially the way he talks, he's you gotta understand, it was amazing being at that time. We didn't have to worry about anything.
And that's what the FBI always gets wrong. It's essentially about this and that.
There are parallels with this movie to other Scorsese's work in the future, and I feel like this movie's kind of not solidified his style, but solidified a style of movie that we now associate with Scorsese. Sort of like, you know how Tarantino, we're always like, oh, he's the guy that does those crazy shootouts and has those really quippy one-liners.
Yeah, really bloody, a lot of pop culture references.
Right, and we got that from Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction, and now we just, every movie we just expect that. I feel like post Goodfellas, now we think of Scorsese as the guy who does freeze frames, who does like voiceover, who does camera movements that crash zoom on someone, who like we think of someone snorting cocaine.
A lot of cursing too.
His
movies hold records for curse words. I don't know if you knew that or not.
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, Wolf of Wall Street was like held the record for the most F-bombs.
It's currently, I looked at the list recently, it's number 3. The other 2 are like movies around swearing. So Wolf of Wall Street technically holds number 1 in regards to a movie that just happens to have swearing.
Yeah.
And it has like 500 like F-bombs in it.
I remember that was a huge thing.
Yeah.
I think this movie did solidify a style that now a lot of people just associate with them, and it got a lot of knockoffs from that. So this movie's very like important that way, and it might be a lot of people's first Scorsese movie that they ever watched.
That I can see that. It is a great, like, it's probably his easiest view.
It's also a lot of like, son, let me show you Goodfellas.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, even leading up to before I watched it for the first time, because I first saw it in high school.
Yeah.
And leading up to it, though, I've heard of it for a while. People have referenced Goodfellas and whatever. I didn't know much about it. I just knew it was about gangsters and it was a true story. I might have seen just the one clip on TV in passing. And it was just the part where they played "Sunshine of Your Love," zooming in on Robert De Niro.
Sure,
it was that's the only shot I remember, and I was like, "Oh, Scorsese's cool," you know. Like, that's all I knew about it. And then I eventually ended up watching it, but yeah.
I think the first Scorsese movie I watched was Goodfellas,
okay.
But it wasn't a thing where I recognized it as a Scorsese movie. I just recognized it as a movie, and I thought it was like, wow, this is a gangster movie. I'd never seen Godfather before. I'd never seen a gangster movie.
Sure.
And I think I saw it on TV, and some parts were censored. But it was funny. I remember watching Wolf of Wall Street in theaters, and I remember my cousin being like, "Oh yeah, that's Scorsese." I'm like, "Who's Scorsese?" He's like, "Oh well, he did Goodfellas."
Oh, you saw Wolf of Wall Street not even like knowing who Scorsese was?
No.
That's funny. Okay,
And
not funny in a condescending way. I'm more like, oh, that's just interesting.
And then my friend was like, "That's good. He did Goodfellas." I'm like, "He did Goodfellas? Oh, oh, like, that makes sense.
It all comes together.
It's like basically the same, which I do want to talk about. But is Taxi Driver your favorite Scorsese movie?
Yeah, it's gonna have to be. It holds a special. Taxi Driver is also the first screenplay I ever read too when I was 13.
Oh, so there's something more special about it.
And just to be clear, that script was like given to me, and like I read it for, I think I read it for like school. We had to read or something like that. It's not like I'm a sophisticated little kid that sought out the screenplay and read it.
Yeah, you threw away your comics. Yeah, you were like, "Bring me the screenplay."
Just to give credit where credit's due.
I want to read Chinatown.
Yeah, exactly. I was not that kid.
So before we get into the story, guys, I just wanted to mention, after each episode of this podcast, we record an after show. It's a 20 to 30 minute video version that's on our Patreon. It's sometimes we talk about movies, sometimes we talk about just stuff going on in our lives.
Altaf showed his DVD collection in the last one, or like his latest DVD haul.
If that kind of stuff interests you and you want to just hang out with us a little bit more, consider joining the Patreon. So are you ready for my synopsis of this movie?
Oh boy, am I.
Outside of Henry Hill's window was a fantastical world he desired more than anything. His very own Emerald City. This was the world of a New York gangster. Once he was allowed entry, everything was for the taking. The money, the women, all of it. But when you have everything, how long do you get to keep it? This is Goodfellas.
Yeah, I like it. I think I can tell, like, even the way you delivered that too is different. Like, oh, I'm gonna put something in this one.
Yeah, it was like a stretch. I'm like, his very own Emerald. So I'm like, okay. I was like, as I was writing
your own writing, you're like, all right, pump the brakes,
buddy.
That's a little pretentious there. But I'm gonna leave it in.
You know, I'm a damaged writer. I never like my own work.
Yeah, definitely. That's your curse, you know.
No, I'm the opposite. I'm way too proud of my own work.
No, it was great. Yeah, that worked perfectly. Yeah. I think it makes it sound a little more dark than it is, but I get it though, you know.
I think it's a place that I wanted to go with this because it is true. The image that always like stands out to me is Henry looking out the window.
Yeah.
Young Henry looking out the window, looking at the gangsters.
I like close-up shot of his eyes.
Yeah, and a lot of that came from Scorsese's childhood. He had an asthma problem as a kid. like a big lung problem, and he to the point where he wouldn't be allowed to go outside because that would mess with his breathing.
Oh man, I didn't know that actually.
So a lot of his life, like a lot of his young childhood, he would draw inside, which is where he got like he says he gets a lot of his visual sense because he used to draw all the time as a kid, and like he used to like make movies as storyboards as a kid, like just draw them out. And another part of it was he used to look out the window and see people like these gangsters hang out, and see people, and like not even just gangsters, but anybody wishing that he was them. And so that image comes from that. It's like a very personal place it comes from. Interesting.
Yeah, that's like the emotional core he was tapping into to show kind of the appeal of being a criminal, essentially, in a weird way.
Well, especially the way they show this world. At least in the first half, it's like, who wouldn't want to be a part of it?
Yeah, well, and it comes from like a very like kind of primal masculine place.
Yeah, that's what it's tapping into for. I mean, he taps into that his whole career.
Exactly. Yeah, he like the way he talks about like people who do the 9 to 5 have no balls. You know what I'm saying? Like they look at it like, oh, we're better than everyone.
His whole career is presenting a conventional idealism for masculinity and then breaking it down. You know, or showing the gray zones behind it. Like, a lot of his movies deal with that.
Yeah, it is interesting. I know Scorsese's a very dark dude. He likes to look into that stuff. You know, the psychology of, you know, evil.
Yeah, and it's what I love about it. It's not dark for the sake of being dark. It's not just like emo. You know, it's way more complicated. Which is like, that's why I love the ending to this movie. Because I love that it's not like, now he's fucked up, look what he did.
Yeah. It's more just like, oh man.
Yeah.
They got me.
That's what I love about it, because it's still from his perspective. He's a type of filmmaker that tells his stories from the character's perspective and commits to that.
Yeah.
Not many filmmakers have the balls to commit to that.
Yeah.
Because they always want to teach the lesson to the audience, and he's never interested in that.
That's the thing, but it trusts the audience enough to draw their own conclusions about it. Because there's like, it's very much his perspective, the way like what the movie wants to show you, what the movie doesn't show you.
Yeah.
And the way he narrates it, and even the way it switches to Karen's narration too. You know, there's a lot of like one-sided stories to it. And all these characters are very much under like an illusion of what they're doing. You know what I'm saying? The way they justify it. Like I said, you know, Henry Hill believes he's just cooler than everyone. That's why he's powerful, is because he's cooler, essentially.
Yeah, he's got the screws on.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, I just take what I want. No one else has the guts to take it, but I do. When really it's like, no, you're just a psychopath. You know what I'm saying? Like that's really the core of it. All of them are literally a bunch of paranoid psychos. You know, not just phrased in the harshest way possible, but that's kind of what it is when you really take a step back.
Yeah, but when you're in that world, how can you see that?
Yeah, but how do they live with themselves? Oh, by tricking themselves into thinking we're just better.
Everyone's always tricking themselves to think that they're doing things the right way, because no one looks at themselves as the villain.
Exactly. Or Karen, for example, too. You know, the way she talks about her husband, like, oh, he's a blue-collar worker. He's no different than the rest of them.
Oh, my God. It's that when that kicks in and she starts, like, justifying why his actions are all right is the most hilarious thing ever.
Yeah.
It's just like, I ended up realizing he's just another blue-collar worker.
Exactly, you know? Which, I mean, props to Lorraine Bracco. Like, she's so good.
So I had something written about Lorraine Bracco here under, like, a performances where I was like, she's going toe-to-toe with Ray Liotta in every scene she's in, but there's still that layer of, I still love this guy, and then another layer of, I'm kind of scared of this guy. But she's doing it all at the same time, where she's trying to one-up him, but then also being desperately in love where she can't let herself do anything, and then also terrified that he's going to do something crazy.
Well, yeah, exactly, which...
To play that as well as she does takes a lot of skill.
I know, and I had to, you know... I watched a good amount of Sopranos, you know, and it took me a little bit. I'm sure you were the opposite, but for me, it took me a little bit to not see Dr. Melfi.
That's so funny, because when I started watching Sopranos, when I heard her voice, all I heard was Karen.
Exactly, like that's probably what more people experience than me. But
because her voice also, it's her voice.
Yeah,
her voice is so iconic.
Such a distinct, like little rasp and a little, you know. It's like a soft rasp with like that's very East Coast.
What are you, some sort of big shot? You think you can stand me up?
Yeah. Which, I mean, her going off of what you said though, like she goes toe to toe with Henry, which I think is something that Henry liked about her. You know what I mean? As soon as like she went and yelled at him, it got his attention.
God.
He was like, "Oh, like you demand respect, like I demand
Their
respect."
first meeting is like my favorite thing, where because Tommy's all upset that like this girl doesn't want to date him alone because he's Italian. And he's like, "Can you believe that in the time we're living in? Like, this type of prejudice." And as like the restaurant they're blowing up is happening,
they're burning it down after like running its credit dry.
But it ends up being a double date that Ray Liotta's not having at all. Henry just rushes her home. Second time, just bails on her. Yeah. And that shot of like Henry reacting when she comes and like yells at him, "How dare you stand me up?" He's like, "Ooh."
Yeah, he's like, "Whoa, okay." Like, didn't expect that.
And then I love that little like, "I thought you were gonna stand me up. You didn't talk." You didn't
I know, you used like 3 different excuses in one go.
And I love how narration is coming on of just like explaining to the audience of why he fell in love with her. And then as you see her smile, you're gonna have to pay.
Yeah, he's totally winning her over through that.
Oh my god. And I love the way they meet, because that whole first half, that whole meet cute, that montage of them like going on dates, getting married, and even like when Henry's like fully in the life, as you said in the beginning, the camera's kind of far away and look, he's doing this stuff. The first half, the camera's mostly just gliding through. If you notice, the cinematography is very much steady cam. We're just gonna show you what's happening. Look how cool these shots are. And then the second half, frenetic editing. Camera's like zooming in way more. It cuts way more.
Yeah, that's, you know what's funny is like, I only caught on to, like you said, the floatiness and kind of, I guess, like dreamlike kind of vibe of the first half. I never really caught on though the second half being like very frenetic and still, but that totally checks out.
And I mean, you can just point directly to the helicopter sequence.
Yeah, exactly. Now that I think about it, I'm like, oh no, that's totally true.
But
it's like,
yeah.
Oh, I was going to mention, going off of that though, is like, I think what makes that so effective, the floatiness of it, is it's almost like Henry's not literally, but psychologically holding your hand and introducing you. You know what I mean? It feels like you're being walked through this area. Kind of, I mean, obviously the Copacabana scene is that, but the whole movie kind of feels like that, where he's like, "Oh yeah, this is so and so. This is what we did."
Going back to that whole thing you said about a guy telling another guy's story at a bar, which I think is just a great way to describe it. I think that's a great segue to what I want to start with, is young Henry, which is kind of mind-blowing that they got an actor by the name of, I have it right here, Christopher Cerrone. I hope I'm getting that right. Who looks remarkably like Ray Liotta.
Yeah, and feels like him too.
And he makes such an impact on me, because I've seen that opening. Like, sometimes I'll go on YouTube and just watch that opening, like, a montage of Henry kind of, like, meeting everyone as a kid.
Okay,
Because I think it's so entertaining.
Making all those little runs between the pizza joint.
Oh, like, yeah, when he meets Tootie.
Yeah.
I love when he meets Tootie and they do that VO of him explaining how, like, Paulie doesn't like to take phone calls, so he has them go indirect ways.
They have this whole system.
So he's holding Tootie's, like, umbrella, and they're, like, running through the rain, and Tootie's, like, waddling with a cigar.
It's like, it's no different. The way they structure it is like, it's no different than, like, an up-and-coming writer PAing or something like that. You know what I'm saying? It's just like him doing his little beginning low-level missions.
That's a great way to describe it. It's, yeah, you get like, a sense of this world, but most importantly, from his eyes, the way he tells the stories, like, what kid wouldn't want to be in? You're living in kind of a shitty Brooklyn apartment with a dad that's abusive, and you get invited in a world that lets you park Cadillacs, and you get $20 put in your pocket just for getting Jimmy Conway a drink.
Yeah, which, you know, we can talk more about it later, but the money is, like, hilarious in this movie. The way they're
So
always just putting
fucking
out
funny.
little dollars to people's money's just like water to
So
these
goddamn
people.
funny. just the way when Karen asked Henry, he's like, "I want to go shopping."
I know, how much? This much.
This much.
Like, how
This
fat the stack is? Like, goddamn. One day, man.
But yeah, you meet Paulie, you meet Tootie, you meet all the characters, right? And watching this after such a long time, did you remember this montage? Like, how much did you remember, and what did you think of it?
I mean, yeah, it's great. I think it's like, I remembered it pretty well. You know, I remember some of the stuff, like, details here and there. I mostly remember Paulie and the way he was, like, super quiet and mysterious to him at the time when he was young.
It says, I think I wrote it down here.
Yeah.
Where it's played by Paul Sorvino brilliantly, R.I.P. He passed away recently.
Yeah.
And he said, Paulie moves slow, but it was only because Paulie didn't have to move for anybody.
Yeah.
And just him eating a hot dog.
I know, and that feels like something that would be in the screenplay to describe him, but it's just funny that it was said out loud in the movie, you know? And I think like...
But sorry, going back to like what you think about...
Yeah, the first impressions, I think it's just interesting that they make it very clear from the get-go he always wanted to be this way. This isn't like a story of a good person who was
sucked in.
Pulled in. Yeah.
Yes.
He was very much like locked in. He knew what he wanted.
Well, that's why, again, the ending stays true to the character.
Yeah.
Like, it's so brilliant. I, like, just love the balls on this movie to do that. But, yeah, you're right. From the beginning, he was like, man, I want to do that. I want to skip school. Yeah. And then when his dad finds out he's not going to school, Tootie and everyone beat the shit out of the mailman.
To make sure he doesn't get any letters from school.
My mom ended up having to call the post.
I know, I love how that's never revealed. It's just kind of passing narration, like, oh yeah, my mom ended up having to look into that.
Yeah, and it's just like, it just sucks. Like, again, I know I'm repeating myself, but any kid would be sucked into that world, especially if he came from that background.
Yeah, well, I think because like the reason why you're mentioning it a lot is only because that's kind of what the whole movie is. It kind of feels like it's this like, we're doing these shitty things, but like, you would do the same, right? If you were in my shoes. I mean, if you had this level of, money and power, it's trying to show the appeal of it at the very least. Like, you can understand why someone would make these decisions.
Yeah, wouldn't you go the same route?
Yeah, and obviously whether you agree with it or disagree with it, that's one thing. But I think that's what the movie presents.
I think it's the line that he says, and I don't have it word for word in front of me, but it's pretty iconic, where it just freeze frames after he's blowing up all those cars.
Yeah.
And you're just like, my mom was walking home, and a group of men offered to hold her groceries for her. Why? Out of respect.
Yeah.
I butchered that line, but it's so impactful, because it's just like, just out of respect for me, they picked up my mom's groceries.
Well, yeah,
I didn't threaten them at all. They just they knew they wanted to get on my good side.
Exactly. Like, obviously, like at the time of the movie being released, being a criminal is a very obviously it's an unconventional lifestyle. Wolf of Wall Street has the same kind of thing, where it's like, it's the lifestyle that not a lot of people can really relate to. Having practically unlimited money, people prioritizing you over everyone else. When you enter restaurants and stuff.
But haven't we all wanted to be part of the cool kids club?
That's exactly what the movie does, where it shows you a reason why someone would turn to that life.
He creates this world that you just believe and that feels alive and has a slew of characters that, like I said earlier, you just remember. Do you want to talk a little bit about how the major characters are introduced?
Yeah. It's very important to the story.
So we talked about Henry. He's introduced as a kid, and then later, you get that clean-ass shot of him, the camera panning up from his gray suit, and then he's just standing there with Joe Pesci.
Yeah.
But that's Henry's introduction.
Well, actually, I would say that's Ray Liotta's introduction, but really the opening of the movie is all of them driving in a car with a guy in the trunk, and they stab him to death.
But I don't consider that a character introduction.
Maybe not so, but I guess it's an important context, because right after Joe Pesci just violently stabs someone, it's a really visceral way to open the movie, and then it freeze frames with this narration saying I really wanted to do this life,
As far back as I could remember, I always wanted to be a gangster.
Exactly, so I think
I was like, let's say it.
yeah, I know. I didn't feel I was paraphrasing, but
yeah.
But basically, he's clarifying that it's a way of telling the audience of these people are psychopaths, but what's the appeal to this life?
Oh my god, but what a great way to start the movie. Not just because it's sick and cool, but also because he says that right after Joe Pesci's stabbing the guy multiple times, and Ray Liotta looks tired, exhausted, sunken eyes.
Yeah.
And he said, as far back as I could remember, I always wanted to be a gangster. And as an audience member, you're explain that to me. Why?
Yeah, exactly. That's what's so effective about it. And then it just opens with this kind of rags to riches song as the credits go.
Literally playing rags to riches.
Yeah, that's right, exactly.
Which is, the music in this movie is just Scorsese being this is the song for this moment. I don't care how obvious it is, I'm gonna play it.
Yeah.
And it fucking works.
But it's effective. It tells you what you need to know.
And Tommy's introduction, we get the young version of Tommy.
Yeah, but that's not really an introduction. He's just a guy.
He doesn't get the Henry Hill treatment because it's just a kid who looks, again, remarkably like Joe Pesci.
It sounds like him too.
I'm like, wow, the casting on this. But I was like, I love that little Joe Pesci. It's like he was like, it's like a little kid was cosplaying as Joe Pesci.
Yeah, or he stole his older brother's clothes or something.
He's like, all right, sure, yeah, Henry got this.
Like, it's so funny to me.
I know, but it looks so, like, if you take a step back, it looks so fucked up that they're recruiting that young, like making a little kid have this slick back hair and a suit.
Yeah, first time watching it, you don't even process that.
Yeah, but it feels like they're just like coworkers, like they're just guys that like behind a clerk
They're literally
stand,
giving teenagers boxes of cigarettes to sell.
Exactly, but they're just, oh yeah, this is the guy you're gonna be working with, and oh hey, how's it going? Cool.
Just kids.
Yeah.
To get to Tommy's introduction, I think we need to also mention the iconic like the iconic like bar shot.
Oh, you're talking about that oneer where it kind of introduces these characters that never come back or anything. I mean,
No,
some
they
of them do. A lot of them do, but they're not like, this isn't
Carboni
like...
comes back.
Yeah.
A lot of them come back.
Yeah, maybe not comes back is the way to phrase it, but I'm just saying, like, it's just funny that they're kind of irrelevant overall to the plot, but it's this big shot, like, oh, this, like it's Ocean's 11 or something. It's just funny, you know?
Can I ask you, like, a question? You might not have one, because I know you haven't seen as much, but, like, do you have, like, a favorite out of all of them, like a favorite nickname or a favorite?
I mean, you know, 2 times, you know, it's probably the obvious one. You know, you can't, it's all, everyone just
every time I watch it, it still makes me laugh. It's like, Jimmy 2 times, because he said everything 2 times. I'm gonna get the papers. Like, it's so good. Because, like, that's a character I don't think we see again.
And the narration's so well timed, too. Like, the pacing of everything, it feels so natural the way
Oh, yeah. They say it right when the perfect time when Ray Liotta stops talking a little bit.
Yeah, right when he opens his mouth.
And a second favorite of mine, because it's so like silly, it's just like, Pete the Killer, I took care of that thing for you.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, yeah, I remember dude, Fat Andy.
Yeah.
Hey, how you doing?
I know, yeah, it was almost like a James Gunn moment or something like that. That's what it felt like.
Yeah. It's so iconic, I know, but I just wanted to mention that because that leads into Ray Liotta talking about, we always thought the 9-to-5 people were just like, you know,
they had no balls. They said, you take the subway to work every day. Yeah.
Right, they're suckers. Then it goes into, not directly, because there is that whole pitch scene of like them pitching Jimmy the heist in Air France. But after that, it cuts to Tommy telling this story that leads into the funny house scene. And I wanted to give that context because it's showing you how cool this world is. These guys are big shots and everything. And this is kind of the first scene where you're like, okay, some of these people are unhinged. And Tommy is unhinged.
They set up exactly what you need to know about Tommy, that he's really funny, he commands a lot of attention, he's kind of a goofy dude. You can understand why people like to be around him to an extent. But then, the minute he has that exchange with the waiter, you realize, like you said, he's unhinged and unpredictable and is capable of anything, essentially.
Yeah.
Right when that scene happens. Not even the funny how, obviously, is really intense, but even the way he, like, smashes the glass over the restaurant guy.
100%. Before we get to that, though, he's telling the story of just, like, I tell the cop I'm resting. Here you're resting? I'm resting. Come
on. Say something. I'll hear something. Go fuck your mother.
And then you get to fucking Ray Liotta's laugh.
Oh, it's iconic. It's such a meme now. Yeah, his big old wide eyes.
Dude, I want that laugh as an alarm clock. Like, I am so obsessed with it because I'm just like, that's something that you just can't get from any other actor. Yeah. It's such a quirk that he brought in.
It's such like, it's the way Jim Carrey does the mimicking of like rich man laughs. You know what I'm talking?
It's a scumbag laugh.
Yeah.
It's a huge scumbag laugh. Like, it's so funny to me. But, and then you get that whole moment. He's saying, you're really funny and everything. Yeah. But it's so great because you see the background extras all a little terrified.
Yeah.
And then the moment he's like, Tommy, get the fuck out of here.
Yeah.
You see the background extras laugh. And it's just, I remember Damien Chazelle when he was promoting Babylon. There's these huge party scenes in Babylon. Babylon, you can tell, takes a lot of inspiration from Scorsese. and he said that a sign of a good director, in my opinion, is I always like to see how the background extras are. Because a good director directs the background extras.
Yeah, they're just as important and part of the scene as anything else, as your leads.
And this time around, watching that funny house scene, I'm like, I could tell Scorsese paid attention to every single person in that bar.
Oh yeah, I remember when I was a teenager, I watched like the bonus features or behind the scenes of Goodfellas. And I know you're smiling, wow, you used to watch bonus scenes.
Yeah. I didn't say it.
I felt it. Someone was saying in the editing that like every cut, when it goes back and forth between Joe Pesci and Ray Liotta, you see the extras, their faces slowly look more scared. It's each cut.
Yeah, and guys, if you haven't noticed that, go back, watch that scene, and just pay attention to the background actors.
Yeah.
It's like just as gripping to watch, and it's a reason why he's one of the greats.
Yeah.
Because he pays attention to that stuff. I mean, to the point where he, in the background, like in the behind the scenes extras for this movie, the actors were talking about like, oh, Scorsese in the middle of a shot would just fix someone's collar because he remembered as a kid these gangsters would have their collars in a certain way.
Wow. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
So he's reaching from so many memories of his past, but he, like, the details are so important to him.
Yeah, and you know the funny thing is he didn't have to include all those extras in that scene. Obviously it was like a table scene, but the real exchange was between, you know, Ray Liotta and Joe Pesci.
But what makes it great is that behind, even just aside from the extras, right behind them are a group of people.
Exactly. Well,
the scene feels alive.
Exactly. That's what I was going to say. Is like he didn't have to include those extras, but he chose to, and it added so much to it. It works so well.
I love bar scenes, but I love when bar scenes are not just like shot, reverse shot, where it feels like you're in a bar with a group of people.
Yeah.
Because, and I think that's just a great example of that, but it's terrifying for obvious reasons, right? Like, Joe Pesci just keeps you on edge, and you're like, for the first time, you're like, Jesus Christ, this guy's horrifying. They break the tension. Something I noticed this watch, and I don't know if you noticed it, in Joe Pesci's performance, every time he gets angry, he kind of like runs out of breath. And it's always like, what the fuck is so funny about me? And it's just like he works himself up so much.
Yeah.
And the movie kind of like explores how he's insecure and has a chip on his shoulder because of his past or whatever, because of his background and all that stuff. The shoe shiner scene, obviously.
Yeah.
But a part of me always wonders, is that performance of him running out of breath every time he gets angry, we consider that a Joe Pesciism, right?
Yeah.
But also, that adds so much to the character of like him getting worked up as he's yelling.
It feels like real visceral anger.
Because it's not the way De Niro gets angry, where he's like stern and he's getting in your soul.
Well, because when De Niro's angry, it feels controlled and logical and cold and calculated. When Joe Pesci's angry, it feels like unhinged,
emotional,
seeing red emotion, can do anything out of impulse. Does not think through what he's gonna do.
100%.
You know?
And so introducing Tommy like that, I feel like you learn so much about a character through this one scene that's scary and funny at the exact same time.
Yeah.
Because even part of me's still laughing when he's like, when the waiter's over there just standing there.
Oh yeah.
It's like, what the fuck are you looking at? I know it's bad what he's, but it still cracks me up.
And the fact that they established he has a reputation too, where they said like the other waiter didn't want to bring your bill to you, like as if like they knew he would be violent, you know?
Oh my god, I know. Like
and he racked up a $3,000.
$7,000.
Oh, 7,000. Yeah, it was 7,000.
Yeah, he was like, he calling me like, what do you mean no big deal? You busted my balls in front of my friends.
Yeah, I know. You're humiliating me if we're already here, you know?
And he's like, don't make a big deal. What do you mean don't make a big deal? He just grabs his tie, smashes the light.
And then everyone just laughs. Everyone's just...
Well, that's what I mean. When it cuts to Ray Liotta just being... It's like, that's the moment because you're kind of on Ray Liotta's side the whole, like, for the beginning parts of the movie. And you kind of are still for a good amount of the movie. But that's the moment where the movie lets you in and it's like, this guy's not a good person.
Yeah, well, and they have those little inklings sprinkled in there, like when Robert De Niro starts like choking the dude with Maury with the telephone wire, and the way Henry just starts laughing really hard.
Well, it's because his wig comes off.
Yeah, exactly. But it's just the fact that like he doesn't give a shit about the violence that they really pull.
But it's so impressive that they were able to have a character that you both root for, and you're like, ooh, yeah, okay.
Well, I know he's like. he's the more likable one, probably for a couple reasons, from very much from his perspective, but also, yeah, he isn't the most like impulsive one. He seems like he's more polite compared to the rest.
He could be terrifying. His eyes go wide, intimidating, all that stuff.
He beats the shit out of someone with a gun. He's just as capable of violence as the rest of them.
Like,
too.
yeah, right when Karen calls him, and it's just like this guy I knew my whole life, my neighbor, touched me and like whatever, right?
Yeah.
And he just drives over, and in this beautiful one shot, it shows him walking, camera pans, beats the shit out of him with a gun, and then when he turns around, his eyes are horrifying.
Yeah.
Right? And also, a thing I noticed that I was always like, as a kid, I was like, how did they do this? Was his face got bloody.
The blood in the same shot, yeah.
But now I'm like, okay, so I thought of different things. One is like, you see a moment where the first punch, after the first punch, the guy who's getting punched puts his hand over his eye like he's in pain.
Yeah.
So I wonder if in his hand he had some like makeup thing.
That's exactly what it was. I actually heard about that.
Oh.
He had a I don't remember.
I felt smart for figuring it out.
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah. I want to say it might have been as simple as he just had a handful of fake blood and just pushed it on his face. And he just had it in at the beginning of the shot and just didn't see it. So when he put his hand on, he had it on already.
Okay, that makes so much sense. But like, I love that they did the work to be like, this is gonna be a one shot.
Oh yeah, and dude, I don't know if it was the sound design or what, but it felt like he was hitting him hard.
Yeah,
like the way he it was.
It's no joke.
Yeah, the way it's like boom, 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 and like it was just so perfectly acted, like fight choreography.
And meanwhile, Karen's like, damn.
I know, damn son.
I mean, she literally said
be like that.
She literally said it turned me on.
Yeah, exactly.
He can have that, but then also have this like, I'm the younger brother. And have a very young brother like energy. Like when they obviously that scene where Tommy has that interaction with Bats, right?
Yeah.
Bats gets like, get your fucking shine box or whatever, and Tommy gets rushed out. Keep him here.
Yeah.
De Niro's like, all right, no, sorry. He gets a little, Ray Liotta was the one who's like, sorry, he gets a little upset. He's always like the damage control for Tommy. He's always Tommy's damage control a little bit.
Yeah, he's more of the peacekeeper
and
in the group.
And he's just like, how the fuck? I mean, I was just we were just gave him a hug, and he does that to me. De Niro's like, nah, you insulted him a little bit.
It's like, to be fair, man. Yeah,
drinks are on the house.
Yeah, I know. Well, what's funny when you mention he has a little brother energy? I actually wrote down that if Robert De Niro, Tommy, Jimmy and Tommy and Henry were all brothers, I actually consider Tommy to be the younger brother, Henry the middle one.
Henry's the middle, yes.
And then Robert De Niro as the older brother.
No, that makes sense. You're completely right.
But still, I know what you're getting at though. Like he's kind of the one caught in the middle, but he's kind of forced to be like, he doesn't really make as many like big decisions that guide where the story goes. He's just sort of part of things for a lot.
And that shows really well when they kill Billy Bats and he's trying to figure out what to do. Remember that shot when Tommy looks at Henry when they're rolling up the body?
Yeah.
They're like, I didn't mean to get blood on your floor. Yeah. And it just cuts to Henry just being like, what the fuck am I doing here?
Yeah.
And when it goes to Tommy's house when they're picking up the knife, and Tommy's mom comes out and they cook the breakfast, Henry's the only one that's not talking.
Well, that's what I actually wrote that down too, funny enough, and quick shout out to Catherine Scorsese. I mean, like...
Okay, so I know I'm jumping around a lot, but do you want to talk about that scene a little bit?
Sure, while we're here, yeah. I mean, just this diamond of an old lady comes out.
Finish your thought about Henry first.
Okay, but yeah, I wrote the same thing. I made the same observation that he is quiet and is clearly like the only nervous one.
And he seems timid.
Yeah.
And he feels like a 12-year-old that just was like, oh, I'm hanging out with adults after hours.
Yeah.
I shouldn't be here.
Yeah, you can tell he doesn't really enjoy the violent part of being a criminal. He just likes the glitz and glamour.
And Jimmy, in a fucked up way, Jimmy and Tommy know that, and they're fucking with him at the table. They're kind of making fun of him.
Yeah.
Like, why don't you talk, man? Yeah. They know why he's not talking, but like... That's why at first I mentioned younger brother, because they're just teasing him. Yeah. But it kind of just shows how fucked up they are. Like, they're all fucked up, but they're a little bit more demented. But let's hit on Catherine Scorsese for a second.
Yeah.
So Scorsese, if you've seen him in any interview talk about this scene, first of all, his parents are in a lot of his movies, especially during that era. You can find his parents in a lot of his movies. They make cameos all the time. And you know what his dad did in the movie? He was the one in the prison that was making the sauce. Remember?
Oh,
the guy
no
with the glasses?
shit.
That was his
Yeah,
dad.
that's so funny.
And when you look at it, you're like, oh, that's Scorsese.
Who put too much onion in
Who put too much onion? He's the guy who was there for 70 for looking behind when someone was selling weed. Remember?
Yeah. That's so funny. I didn't know his dad was in it too. I only knew his mom was.
No, and there are a lot of his movies. There's this great documentary that Scorsese made before, when he was young. Before he had like Taxi Driver and all of that, called Italian American. Okay. And it's his mom and dad just hanging out in an apartment, and it was supposed to be his mom explaining how she makes her sauce, but they go on so many tangents, it feels like an old couple talking and each other.
That sounds awesome.
That's what they make the documentary into.
Yeah.
And at the end, in the credits, they show the sauce. But it's a 40...
It's not really about sauce, you know?
So if you like this scene, go watch it. It's 40 minutes and it's on HBO Max.
Okay.
It's like one of my favorite things. But Scorsese always talks about how doing this scene, there wasn't very much a script to the scene. Because for her, she was so familiar with De Niro and Joe Pesci because they'd done movies in the past together.
She just felt like she was talking to her son's friends or something like that, yeah.
Scorsese literally says it was like, oh, to them it wasn't like Robert De Niro and Joe Pesci. To her it was like, oh, Marty's friends.
Yeah.
Marty's friends are over for dinner.
Yeah.
And like, so he just told his mom, treat it like that.
Yeah.
And so the line where she holds up the painting and she says, one pointing east, one pointing west, why do you care? That's improv by her.
Oh, okay.
And a lot of the energy in that scene is from that, because she knew De Niro and Pesci really well, but she didn't know Ray Liotta that well.
Oh, okay, so there was like a real chemistry there that was pretty authentic on camera. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and so you can tell who knows each other and who has that relationship and who doesn't.
That's like my favorite line too, is when Joe Pesci's like, oh, one dog's facing one way, the other's facing the other way, this old man's here, like, yeah, what's it to you? Or whatever he says. Like,
yeah.
But here it's like, hey, what about it? Whatever he says.
The one iconic moment in that scene is, well, two things that De Niro does. Yeah. One is how he rolls out the ketchup.
Yeah, I've heard about that one.
Which is, he did this very De Niro thing where, like, in his research for that role, he literally asked, like, I think
that's a real Henry Hill, if I remember correctly.
How Jimmy poured ketchup. Like, what were his little quirks? And so he copied that from the real Jimmy Conway. Yeah. I'm like, that's such a De Niro, like, I'm going to get this specific nuance thing.
Yeah, with that being said, I mean, I wish I could get ketchup out that easily. Have you seen how, like, you see how gracefully he does it in the movie?
Trust me, I have tried. I have tried in a diner doing it that way.
I know, we all want to do it like Robert De Niro, but no, I'm the guy who sticks a butter knife in the glass bottle of ketchup.
We all are. And the second thing that he did that became iconic in a really funny way is the way he says hoof. He's like, so what's that thing in the paw? Hoof.
Yeah. Because they're clearly trying to bullshit their way through the story of him hitting a deer, so he has to use the big steak knife to, like, cut it out of the grill of his car.
I know, and the dialogue just seems so natural. It's just like, when she says, like, that joke, he's like, yeah, but it sounds so much better in Italian. Yeah. And then Joe Pesci says something in Italian.
Yeah.
And then De Niro just, like, casually, like, what's that? But it doesn't, like, cut to him saying it. It just says, it keeps it on a wide.
Yeah, I mean, the dialogue in this movie overall is so natural, but it doesn't feel, like, writery, if that makes any sense. It doesn't feel like a writer showing off. It feels like this is just how these guys are talking, and you're going to have enough fun watching them.
Scorsese's also really famous for letting actors improv. Mm-hmm. Which you wouldn't expect, right? Because he's such a prestige director who's done it for so long. But he's the type of guy, Jonah Hill's talked about it, a lot of actors who've worked with him talked about it. Like, he lets the camera roll, and basically he lets actors work it out and see what happens. But he's so good at, because a lot of times you can let actors improv, and then when you watch the movie, you can tell
it's kind of sloppy, kind of, yeah.
But he's so good at bringing it back to the story. So Jonah Hill tells his amazing story. It's just like, we were improvising, we were going this and that, and then Scorsese just stopped after the 10th take. He's like, okay, I want you to take that line that you came up with in that take and take that line and let's bring that together. And Leo, I want you to respond this way. Like, he has it all in his head.
Yeah, because I heard for Goodfellas, a lot of the dialogues from rehearsals that he transcribed into the script.
Yeah.
Too, which is pretty cool. So and it totally checks out how, you know, those lines feel improvised.
That's how you get that energy, and that's why that scene is just... It's one of my favorites because it's such a great subversion of expectations, because you think it's going to be this intense, like, hiding the body scene that we've seen in so many crime movies, but then it turns into this wholesome late night breakfast.
Well, and the fact that, like, It's one thing if she just made them like some, bowls of
No,
soup.
she makes a
She
spread.
full on like cooks.
And how Jimmy's like, go to sleep. Why are you awake? He's like, no, I can't go to sleep. I never see him. I need to see him.
I know, and that's the thing. It's like, just to go back to like how this movie has so many relatable things. Like, we've all had that being at like a friend's house and meeting their mom, and the mom just wants to spend time with the son.
Do you want anything? You're not even eating.
Exactly. Like that's
like how she asks Henry, like, oh, honey, you're not even talking. Like, what's wrong? Like, you don't talk?
I know. And then she just wants to show her son her painting.
Oh, and I love how like right before like the whole like I'm gonna get made scene.
Yeah.
Oh, he's like, stop having all these religious paintings around the house. Like,
Yeah. And how the mom's still hounding him about not settling down.
He's like, I see a girl one night and then I wake up and then
Yeah, he's like, I settle down every night and then I'm free and then the next morning.
I love you. I want to be with you.
I know.
It's just like this character Tommy who is unhinged, has his screws off, is still a mommy's boy. He loves his mom, and his mom loves him. Yeah. Like, that's where this movie has its real magic. Of just, like, these fucked up characters, but the reason you want to hang out with them is because they have that. They have those tiny things like a relationship with your mom, or hanging out with your friends, or being part of the cool kids club, where you can always, like, come back to.
Yeah.
And relate yourself with,
Yeah. And the movie makes a point to where it's willing to set aside the horrible crimes that they do.
Yeah.
Because of how glamorous they live.
I think this is a great point because from this point we can go on to talk a little bit more about De Niro's performance throughout this entire movie. Mm-hmm. But I'd love to talk about Jimmy Conway's entrance. And then what we can do is kind of go talk a little bit about all the things that De Niro does in this movie that I just love.
Yeah.
Love so much because in my opinion, I don't know about you, but I'm not afraid to say it. I think this is my favorite De Niro performance.
Is that even something to be afraid to say?
Well, a lot of people always like to, and I think the general opinion is like Taxi Driver or Heat or stuff like that.
That's true.
Or Raging Bull.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I think those are the ones that people are like, yeah, that's his best performance. I think Joe Pesci and Ray Liotta kind of take over this movie in terms of like the public eye of the
standout performances.
Yeah, but oh my God, Jimmy Conway's entrance is like he's a movie star coming in. Robert De Niro is a movie star, but like the way
they give him a movie star entrance. I see what you're saying. Yeah.
It's young Henry's like whole narration of just like this was before this and that. I mean, we had it all. It was, I had the world. It was when I had the world. And it was when I first met Jimmy Conway. Literally comes from the shadows into the light. Immediately giving everyone money.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it just sets up the precedent. Like, oh, this is who I want to be. Like, or at least from Henry's perspective.
He seems like the coolest guy in the room. Mm-hmm. And the line says, I mean, the bartender got $100 just for keeping the ice cubes cold.
Yeah, exactly. He was just putting out money like nothing in this world.
And he just gives it 20 to Henry. He's like, a 7 and 7. Keep them coming.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm at that point of the movie. I like remember the drink orders.
Yeah. Like, that's how familiar you are with it.
Yeah. How'd you feel about Jimmy Conway?
I think I had trouble figuring out how I wanted to write about Robert De Niro's performance because it's like, well, it's perfect, like no shit. You know what I mean? That's where my brain goes immediately. I'm like, dude, it's hard to even analyze because I don't think I've seen a single like bad performance from Robert De Niro to where I can watch literally anything. I'm like, oh, Robert De Niro's good in it.
There's some bad performances he's given in the past, but it's mostly
maybe so. Yeah,
it's bad as in like I've checked out and I'm literally only gonna get paid for this movie. And that's it.
That's probably fair. Yeah, I get that, but I guess the point I'm really getting at is more of like it's fucking Robert De Niro. It's like hard to even find stuff to say.
Okay, then I'll take the lead on.
Yeah, go ahead. I want to hear like you break it down because you can do it better than me.
He is kind of Henry's inspiration and also Henry's biggest downfall. He comes in, Henry's like, that's the man. That's the guy. Who's this guy? How can I be like him? Right? But he also mentions like Jimmy loves stealing.
Yeah.
He likes to root for the bad guys in the movies.
Yeah, they still set up those inklings that like he's still not a good person and will hurt who he needs to hurt.
And the way like when they take that guy and they're torturing him to get the money, and then Jimmy's like, let's feed him to the lions. Yeah, at a zoo. It's like the funniest thing, and like I love Ray Liotta's little narration there of just like, they weren't surprised when we're feeding them lions. I guess that kind of thing happens often here.
Yeah, I know. They're not the first to attempt that.
But De Niro has these moments in this movie that I think I remember more than any De Niro performance ever. And maybe it's not the best performance, but it's just my favorite. And one scene that's very vital is after Henry gets pinched. And remember that shot of just like his attorney pulling him back and just smiles at the judge? And then Jimmy kind of just like, hey, good job, kid, right? And he's like, why? I got pinched. He's like, you never rat on your friends. And he gives him like the rules of life.
Or he says, keep your mouth shut and never rat on your friends. Those are like the 2 rules.
And it's this tight, low-angle close-up of just like, that makes you feel like Dad's telling me what to do.
Yeah, and
he sees, at that moment, he sees him as a dad figure.
Yeah, and not to jump to the end or anything, but it's such a cool payoff that the one rule he sets in the beginning is keep your mouth shut. Like you can basically get away with anything in this world as long as you keep your mouth shut and never rat on your friends.
And the way he gets away with it is ratting.
And that's the only way he survives at the end. That's what saves his life, is ratting on his friends.
Okay, well, real quick, gotta mention that lovely moment of Henry walks out and everyone's like, hey, you broke his chair. And all the celebrating, so happy for him.
And that's how you transition to him, to actually Ray Liotta, like the adult version of Henry. Right. The fact that, like, it's basically like, oh, he's locked into this world now. He grows up in it.
And there's a lot of moments that Jimmy has throughout this movie that De Niro has, basically, where he does what is his superpower, which is using his eyes and using his ability to just be quiet and be present in the scene. Number one example. Not number one as in this is the best example, but an example that just pops into my mind early on in the movie is when the security guard at the airport and Henry are pitching Jimmy on the Air France heist at the bar early on in the opening. They call Jimmy over and the camera crash zooms on Jimmy being like, I'll be right there. And I just want to say, Jimmy comes up and they start telling him like how they're going to steal this thing at Air France. And in the span of like 3 seconds, Jimmy takes a shot, smokes a cigarette, takes a sip of a beer. It's just, I'm like, wow.
I think what Robert De Niro does that's...
real quick.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
But they're all... And the shots are very tight on them because they're, like, trying to keep it quiet. And what I love is just, like, he just being there, like, oh, okay. Oh, all right. Like, he's not saying anything. And he's, like, trying to keep it quiet. But you can tell he's soaking it all in. And it's just so exciting to watch him. It's like... I don't know. It's just like watching Jackie Chan do an action scene. It's like you're watching a great actor cook.
Yeah, exactly. You're watching a man
do what he's best really
at.
Good
yeah.
It's why I think I love De Niro and Jackie Brown because I'm like, no one could do that but De Niro. It's like playing with silence.
Totally. Well, that's what I was, funny to extrapolate on that is that like what Robert De Niro's really good at is he doesn't perform in a way where he's trying to steal the attention or the scene.
No.
You know what I'm saying? Because like, there's some actors that obviously like, that are stars and are knowing like, oh, I'm the face of this movie, so I'm going to perform in a way knowing the audience is going to be looking at me. Yeah. De Niro doesn't really perform that way. He gives it what the scene needs, but in doing so, makes him like the strongest figure in it.
Watch The Irishman. Watch The Irishman, because he's doing that times, like he barely talks in The Irishman.
Yeah.
But it is such an amazing performance.
Because like,
anyways,
yeah, because in a movie where, because probably at the time Robert De Niro is probably the biggest star. He's the center of the poster. You know what I'm saying? At the time when the movie came out,
he's top billed. Like if you look at the credits, his name pops up first before Ray Liotta.
Exactly. So, but what's cool though is that like he does not try to outact either of them when they're all together doing their crazy antics.
But here's the ironic part: you're completely right, but. What happens, though, because he's so good at doing exactly what you said, you end up only wanting to stare at him in scenes. You only want to know what he has to say.
Yeah.
Because he's De Niro and he can capture your attention in that way.
Yeah.
I'm trying to mosey around this scene because it's so good. Him taking a drag of the cigarette, watching Maury, knowing that he's going to kill him.
Oh, yeah, and Sunshine of Your Love kicks in.
Yeah, just... I watch that scene just to feel better sometimes. Just to be like, filmmaking is real, movies are great. Like, just watching that scene because it's so perfect.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, God, like, how the fuck are you able to do that?
Yeah, I know, dude. And just real quick, just remind me, Maury, the character of Maury felt like someone from Uncut Gems or something
Yes!
like that.
Oh my
So, like, dude, I felt so bad for Maury.
I love you so much because I was going to bring that up. I was literally going to say he feels like one of the guys that would disturb Howard every now and then.
Exactly, and so like, I think I just felt bad for Maury because like he was entitled to his money.
He wants his fucking money, but like the thing was though, he also just didn't understand that like shut your fucking mouth.
Exactly, that's why the whole time
you're not gonna get it this way.
Every time I was seeing him, I was like, dude, like just shut up, because like you have to make it seem like you're just with the guys and you enjoy what you do, and the money will come with it. You know, but only being in it for the money was like setting you up for danger in a way.
Yeah, and he just like every time he talked, I'm like, please, dude, turn around.
You're like, shut your mouth.
And I love Henry just being like, just give him the money. You give him the money.
That's what adds to, again, Henry being like kind of the likable one, because he's usually the middleman. Like, you know, in those scenes, he'll always be like, no, don't fuck around. Oh, sorry about my friend here.
Well, even that first interaction where he's trying to get Maury to shut up, and they have Jimmy wait in the lobby while he's trying to help, and you just see Jimmy watching Maury's ad, which is like the most funniest ad for hair wigs ever, and he's watching it angry and looking over, and he's just like, what are you offering me 20% vig on it? Are you fucking kidding me?
Yeah.
Or whatever he says, and then he just comes over and ties him up with a telephone wire. But yeah, man, that shot of him taking a drag is just like his eyes are wide, and also if you watch that scene, someone's talking to him.
Yeah.
So he's trying to be like,
yeah, exactly. His mind is clearly set elsewhere.
I mean, there's another De Niro scene that I think I've quoted to you a lot and I've talked to you about that we can talk about. Mm-hmm. So post Lufthansa Heist, I just want to say they play after they're successful and Ray Liotta has that iconic "Yes, Jimmy!"
Yeah.
In the shower. It cuts to the bar. Frosty the Snowman is playing.
I know, it's like clearly Christmas time.
And the happiest I've ever seen De Niro in a movie ever. I was just like, come here, you.
Yeah, they have like a fat pile of money, too.
But just like, I love the wide arms, come here, you. The camera's just on him.
I know.
And Johnny Roast Beef comes in with his wife.
And he shows him his brand new pink car.
He's like, I love that coupe. Named it after my mother.
Yeah.
And he's like, what the fuck is wrong with you? What the fuck? I told you not to buy anything, not to say anything.
What are you, stupid? What?
He's like, it's not under my name, it's my wife.
It's under my mom's name. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. He's like, oh, fucking take it back. Get it out of here. And he's just like, it's under my mom's name. Are you being a fucking wise guy?
I'm sorry.
He just keeps saying, he says, I'm sorry like 100 times.
I know. Because he's like embarrassed in front of his wife.
God, I love that. And then right after that whole interaction, a woman with like another guy comes in and like his wife is wearing like a fur coat,
like a brand new fur coat,
and he's like, Jimmy, he's like, what the fuck is wrong?
I'm taking this off.
Take it back. I don't want to see it.
But it's funny because he's totally right. You know what I'm saying? Like the cops are watching them, looking for any reason to pinch them.
And then Jimmy just kills all of them.
Yeah, exactly.
He kills everyone involved in that Lufthansa heist.
Yeah, except for, Henry Hill and Tommy.
Yeah.
Funny enough. But this is the thing, though. Like I said, the movie shows the after effects of the murder. We see the bodies and there's whimsical music playing. But
you also, you see Frankie in the, like, freezer, the meat locker.
Yeah, exactly. Corpses in a dumpster, and then, what are their names again in the car that get shot?
Johnny Roast Beef, I don't know his wife's name.
Yeah,
I know Johnny Roast Beef.
Johnny Roast Beef.
Because I'm like, what a name.
But, you get this kind of whimsical angle where the camera's just pushing in on them, where it's like they're kind of almost like posed.
Because from Henry's perspective, nothing's wrong yet.
Well, exactly. That's what I'm saying, is that Henry doesn't really give a shit about the people he killed. He's like, you know what I'm saying? He doesn't really have any guilt or stress about it. He's like, well, everyone got killed except us.
Yeah, we're good.
Yeah, that's all he really cared about.
But once Tommy gets killed,
yeah,
and then things starts going awry, right?
Yeah, really fast. Jimmy
slowly gets more and more paranoid. Then the worst thing happens is Tommy. It's announced that Tommy's gonna get made, with Jimmy so happy. It's like he's a dad for his kid.
Yeah.
He's like, oh my god, look at you.
Well, they even said Tommy getting made is like all of us getting made. He's like kind of our hometown hero.
Because Jimmy's Irish, so he can't. And once Tommy gets shot because of what they did with Billy Batts, I mean, you get that amazing scene where he just fucks up that telephone booth.
Oh yeah, when he finds out, and he's told in such a businessy way too. He's like, he's gone. There's nothing we can do about it.
And how Ray Liotta in his narration is like, we just had to take it.
Yeah.
And even Jimmy knew that.
Yeah.
Jimmy as kind of unhinged Jimmy was, he was like, well, fuck, shit.
Yeah, he was powerless to the situation.
And he just cried, and he broke down. But it's after that where it just, like, all goes down to shit.
Yeah.
Where it truly becomes like a 1v1 with Henry and Jimmy, and not directly, which is what I love. And which Henry explains is like, see, when you get shot, when you get whacked, it doesn't happen with a warning. It doesn't, like, you don't know, it just happens. So
yeah, it leads to the point where, like, the very family, like you mentioned earlier, you know, saying like, oh, we all want to feel part of a family, we all want that power, that camaraderie. Those very same people are just super down to kill you if you're a threat to that life.
Yeah,
you know?
and like, I mean, Henry explains it to Karen in the prison, right?
Yeah.
And he's like, what do you mean? Paulie is on probation. He wants to stay. He doesn't want anyone to do anything. We don't have anyone. We just have us. And Jimmy was in Atlanta in a prison too. So like, Henry's like very clear on that. He's like, oh, things are going south. Like, we only have each other. So I'm going to do this coke thing, get those deals going, because we have nothing else. And Karen, you can tell, Karen's like the rest of us, where she wants to still kind of hold on to that family. She has like, she's like, but we were having so much fun. We would go on vacations.
Yeah, exactly.
I love those photos, by the way. Those photos of like family on vacation and Jimmy pouring like water on Henry as he's asleep.
Well, and going off of the family thing, off of the photos, because I remember like Karen was saying in her narration around that time that like they just got used to no one else hanging out with them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that was like their only company they kept. And like that's what, again, with this movie that's interesting is that the cast is pretty tight. You know, it's a very sprawling movie that has, you know, a lot like time jumps, very flowy, really busy scenes. But the main characters are probably like 6 people total. You know what I'm saying?
And they feel like such a family of just like, who wants to go to Uncle Paulie's house for dinner, and then you go to Paulie's house and you see the kids. But I also love that tiny touch of the kids disturbing Karen. It's like, let your mom eat, and that's just like a family thing.
Exactly. And so I think it's just interesting that they kind of make it seem like, okay, no one else is allowed into this world because it's so, you know, obviously volatile.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, I do think we should talk about it a little bit, that whole scene where Jimmy tells Karen to just, over there, right there. The dress is right there.
Yeah.
You don't know what it means. You don't know where he's leading her. Is he leading her to dresses? It's just in a sketchy area. But it just feels so unsettling.
Yeah.
And it's a type of scene that only De Niro and Scorsese could do together.
And create that kind of tension off of something so seemingly, you know, minuscule. See a bunch of people in that building that you don't really know if you like recognize them.
The thing that's insane is that it could be dresses.
Yeah.
It could just be like off-brand dresses that they're trying to hide. But it also could be people that take Karen in and ask her, like, what are they questioning, you know?
Or they could have just killed her immediately, too.
Yeah.
Like, it seems like it was most likely the case. They were just going to, you know, whack her.
Also, like, De Niro looks way more terrifying older. Like, great, like how they grayed his hair and made his glasses like this.
Yeah, easily.
Pushed it down.
I saw a video recently that was speculating on who could have ratted on Tommy, because when they killed Bats, it was seeming like they got away with it for a while. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, it has to be like someone in the bar.
Yeah, well, either that, and someone theorized, I saw interestingly, that it was Karen because she smelled the corpse and might have mentioned something in passing to Paulie, because Paulie talked to her.
Interesting.
Too. You know what I'm saying? But there are some interesting details, and the video was kind of just bringing up that because the movie's so perspective focused, there's a lot that happens that we might not know about. Like, some people theorize that Paulie and Karen had an affair, too.
Yeah,
you know?
I know just how to talk to her, especially to her.
Exactly. There were some things in there that some people are wondering, like, oh, was there something going on, you know?
Yeah,
but
part of me doesn't think, I think that Paulie and Karen probably didn't have an affair, but they could have been talking to each other.
Yeah, exactly. And it was just this quick side note, though, of them like having to dig up his body after 6 months to move it because they bought the property.
Like, it's just like, and I was just like, Henry, he's like, Jimmy, it's been 6 months. I don't care how long it's been. We gotta. And then just like fucking Tommy and Jimmy fucking with him. He's like, here's an arm. Do you want a wing or a leg? And like fucking Henry's throwing up. He's like, oh, it's horrible.
Again, not to just, this is the third time mentioning it, I apologize, but it goes back to, this is why Henry's kind of the watchable one in the group.
He's relatable.
Exactly. He's relatable, and he seems like he has more of a head on his shoulders and more of a level of humanity to him than the rest.
You know, speaking on that, I was gonna get to the helicopter scene where like it's one of my favorite sequences in a movie ever. Just like, I think it's a movie within a movie. But before we get to that, it's insane we haven't talked about the Copacabana scene yet. Because it's one of those scenes, because, like, I know we talked about Funny House, so this is kind of ironic, but, like, everyone has talked about that scene to death.
I mean, it's the scene I've rewatched the most, even after not having watched the movie in a while.
We all
pull up the Copacabana scene and we're like, oh, wow, filmmaking's cool.
It's right after, it's after Henry and Karen really get together and it's going. And it's to show you the magic of this world. Because we've heard Henry talk about it, we've seen a little bit of it, but this is the true magic. It's basically a pitch, this is why you want to be in it. But it's not just that, it's also like Karen falling in love with Henry.
Yeah, and in
Karen
proxy,
also falling in love with the world.
And by proxy, it kind of makes you fall in love with the world too. You know what I'm saying?
It's, okay, so many moments in here. The thing that you and I quote to each other is what probably a lot of people do. Is like, every time you two. Don't you work?
Don't you work? Yeah, exactly.
Then He Kissed Me playing, which is the perfect song to play.
Yeah.
It's a girl falling in love with a boy. He's like, I don't like going through the front, I like going through the back, it's quicker or whatever. And he says that to her. And someone analyzed it just like, it's such a great way to show, along with what power can do, but also how, like, this is the type of power where you still don't get to go through the front door, you have to go through the back door.
You have to take a shortcut, essentially.
Yeah. And I want to talk a little bit about the kitchen, because fucking they're
obscene.
It's insane. It's
so crazy how they achieve that.
Because I'm like, it's an actual kitchen. There's people working here. The guy I always remember, I don't know if you remember him, I've watched this scene so many times. I always remember that one guy at the expo station just like smiling at Jimmy as he's walking by. It's this older dude. And then I also remember like a worker knocking another worker off, and both like Henry and Karen look over and Henry's laughing. Karen's like, come on, stop. It's just like, it's so alive.
Yeah, I know. It's insane that, again, I don't want to say it again, but it's crazy that was achieved. Down to like the blocking, down to no one bumping into the camera, everyone seeming like real people. Like the fact that you were able to like memorize and catch on to the extras.
Yeah.
That's intentional. You know, that's no accident.
Man. And it's two things about it. First of all, if you probably knew this, it's a known fact, and maybe you didn't, but for the audience who didn't, they walk around in a circle and go through the same way that they came in.
Yeah.
But they shot the scene in a way where you don't notice. But they go through the exact same door. And if you watch it closely, you can tell they just went around in the circle. But in terms of where they could shoot, they had to shoot it that way. Yeah. So they blocked out the main entrance to the area when they walked in, so you don't see it.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And when they walked around, they changed the set rapidly.
Damn, I didn't know that. That's even fucking great. What the fuck? Yeah. How do you do that?
And here's another thing. A lot of people obviously give Scorsese credit to being like, what a long shot.
Yeah.
One of the most iconic long takes, whatever.
Sure.
CineFix did an amazing video where they interviewed the Steadicam operator. And you realize how much the Steadicam operator had to do with this scene being constructed. Because obviously the Steadicam operator had a huge role.
Yeah.
And I have his name right here, Larry McConkey, Steadicam operator, and I will link this video in the description, but it's great because he talks a little bit about how he worked with Ray Liotta, and him and Ray Liotta worked together, because originally the scene didn't have much interaction with people in there, but him and Ray Liotta together came up with the don't you work, work you two or whatever, don't you work.
Yeah, every time you two don't you work.
And just creating that like interactions with the workers, doing it multiple times to get that right.
Yeah.
And then Scorsese would come in and is like, no, they would bring the table with the cloth. You got to do that. I've been to the Copacabana or whatever.
Man.
And Steadicam was like, okay, we'll get that detail right. Like Scorsese was responsible for a lot of the smaller details. Because he even said...
He's so familiar with that.
Yeah. Well, he said when he was younger, he tried to go to the Copacabana with friends. And he said his friends would come in early, they would get the front row seats, and they'd be like, oh my god, a comedian's going to come up, it's going to be crazy. And then suddenly, a table would come in front of them. Like, waiters would bring a table, and then the guys in suits would sit down.
Damn.
And just like, he remembered that.
Damn gangsters.
The moment where they bring out the table... They're like, oh, come over here. And a waiter just has a table to put in front. It like, when I first saw that movie, I'm like, elite shit. Like, I want that.
Yeah, I know. Well,
imagine going into a full restaurant and someone being like, All right, bring the table out.
Oh yeah, and you can hear people that are still in line, like, hey, how come we don't get a seat? And it's like, you'll get your turn. Like, I know, yeah, that's elite shit, also, like you said.
Also the way like Henry just like shakes everyone's like, how you doing? How you doing? Karen's like, you gave everyone a 20. It's no big deal.
Yeah.
And then it's just like, Henry, this is from the table over there. And does a whip pan of everyone be like, Henry.
I know, and that's when she asks, like, what do you do? And he's like, I'm in construction.
And then she touches his hand.
Yeah.
He's like, they don't feel like they're in construction. He's like, union.
Yeah, he's like, I'm a corporate dude, basically. I think the main thing with it is it's affected to the writing too, because obviously it's an incredible shot in terms of technical achievement, but it's also important to the story, the way it's told.
Because it's a very romantic view.
Exactly. Like, it would not work if it was hard cuts. The fact that it's just moving through, flowing, like I said earlier, it feels like Henry Hill's holding your hand, showing you stuff. You know?
Yeah, you're Karen.
And it's not
the audience is Karen.
Exactly. It's not a relatable world. It's not like, because that type of shot wouldn't work if someone's just going to their, clerk job.
But again, you're Karen, so you're falling in love.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like I said, he's 21 years old. He has all this stuff. Like, who wouldn't want to be with him?
Totally.
So now you're also in Henry's perspective of like, I want to be a part of this world, but then you're also in Karen's perspective. It's like, I'd fall in love with Henry.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I always thought that cut was interesting of when they cut to Tommy and Henry doing the heist, stealing from the airport.
Yeah, while the comedian's cracking those punchlines.
I always wondered, why was his dialogue overlaid with that? Because it overlays it for a while. It's not a quick thing. And it overlays it for a while, and I wonder if it's just to juxtapose, like, all right, this is the fancy life where this comedian's just telling jokes, it's all fun and games, and now they're stealing. But it was always such an interesting edit for me.
Yeah, I mean, I took it as like the movie's way of reminding you of where this glitz and glamour comes from.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That like these are thieves and murderers.
Which I think is a great time to just quickly mention, very quickly. I wish we could talk about her more. Thelma Schoonmaker, who's been with Scorsese since Raging Bull, all the way up to The Irishman, has edited every single movie of his.
Damn.
And she's gonna edit. She edited Killers of the Flower Moon that's coming out.
Wow.
And she's still working with Scorsese.
Just her go-to, or Scorsese's go-to editor.
It's one of the most iconic filmmaking partnerships.
Wow.
It's people know Thelma Schoonmaker, which is not common for people knowing the editor.
Yeah, I think the only other example I can really think of is maybe like Sally Menke, working with Tarantino before she passed away.
Yes, sure, 100%. And as an editor, she's like a fucking icon.
Yeah.
Well, and also she of course she's iconic because she helped, like, the style that Scorsese has very much is figured out in the edit.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to mention that real quick because she's a fucking genius and deserves everything.
Oh, hell yeah.
All right, so now that we just finally mentioned the Copacabana scene.
The most romantic scene in the movie.
Which, I mean, like, I want to wonder if a lot of people, like, watching the podcast are going to be, like, trying to skip around to wait to see when we talk about it. And they're like, fucking an hour in? Jesus Christ. But I think it's interesting because, like, you get this very romantic view, and then by the end of the movie, one of the most iconic sequences is that helicopter sequence.
Yeah.
Which is the exact opposite.
And it covers one day, right? Isn't it essentially over one day, that scene?
Yes, I genuinely think this could be its own movie if it wanted to, which I find amazing. So everything's gone to shit. He's trying to get these bullets, or he's trying to get these guns for Jimmy.
To match the suppressor that he just got.
He's trying to get his coke to finish his job. At the same time, he's picking up his brother, and he's making dinner.
Yeah.
Which is him making an Italian dinner. I mean, he's Italian, but him making a dinner while having to do all these things is the most Scorsese touch you could have.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and the narration's like way faster and more rambly too.
The cuts. Did you notice the cuts? How it'll cut? Yeah. It'll show him turning around, and then it'll do a close-up of him turning around again. Yeah. Like the same shot, but just a little closer.
Yeah, you can just feel that paranoia and stress building up.
Him telling his brother, like, all right, keep stirring. Okay, let's get the coke. Let's do this.
And you see how, like, his hair, he just dressed less cool. His hair's messy.
And the music is changing. So the music, there's one music track, and then right when he snorts coke, it rapidly changes.
Damn.
You're inside his brain.
Yeah.
And then a helicopter's chasing him through that entire thing.
Yeah.
And you're in Henry's position. Is he paranoid? He could be.
Exactly, yeah. He's just looking back and it's clearly, there's more to it than just the helicopter, what he's afraid of. He just knows how much shit's building up.
It's almost over.
It's almost over, and he's refusing to accept it.
The way he hides the guns at Karen's mom's place, he's like, make sure they don't open anything outside of the home.
Yeah.
He's like, you couldn't keep it at your mom's place?
Yeah.
When I watch this scene, and I'm like, oh, this is where Safdie brothers got it.
Yeah. They took that last sequence, was like, oh, we can do that and make a whole movie out of it.
Safdie brothers have been very open about how much they were inspired by Scorsese, and also it's not like a smart take to just be like, Safdie brothers were inspired by Scorsese.
Yeah.
But watching Uncut Gems, you can't help but like, you already mentioned the Maury sequence.
Yeah, exactly.
But you're like, oh, yeah, this guy who did it first.
You see those dots being connected for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned to you, like, as much as I've seen this movie, I also rewatched the first half way more than I rewatched the second half. Mm-hmm. And I was leaning in a bit more in the second half because I didn't remember all the details. I remembered it, but not all the details. And I thought it was interesting because the second half is obviously the more stressful and anxiety-filled one. So
yeah, I mean, like, in the first half is more like fun to watch.
Romantic, yeah.
Yeah.
So what did you think of this?
I mean, it's fucking awesome. I mean, I love the way, like, he becomes such a mess. You know,
sweaty.
Yeah, he looks disgusting at the end of it, you know, and like everyone knows he's on drugs too. Karen's like full on a mess too.
Oh, Karen just comes in and she's like, I need a hit.
Yeah.
Or whatever. And you didn't know she was doing drugs, but I mean, obviously she is.
And like the kids are older, but the movie barely touches on the kids or how they turn out to be. I mean, there's probably no room for it realistically, but it's so interesting that like the movie's so focused on like what he was really focused on was his crime life.
Henry
and he
was
never
not focused
home.
on the kids.
That's what I'm saying. He was never home, and it's so from Henry's perspective. Like he did not give a shit about his kids.
Yeah,
you know.
And this is, I think, what a lot of people point to when they talk about Ray Liotta's performance. Mm-hmm. It's obviously the sequence.
Yeah.
Because goddamn, dude, the guy dials it up to like 100. Yeah. It's a pretty important Scorsese sequence too, because this is, I think, the thing that people point to towards Scorsese a lot. There's a lot of shots in here that are, especially the way when Ray Liotta opens the door and the camera like zooms in on the handle.
Yeah,
that's a pretty, like, whenever people talk about, whenever there's video essays talking about Scorsese, they show that shot a lot because it's like he's known for his frenetic filmmaking. It made me also think about like the small scene where they teach him how to make the sauce in Godfather.
Yeah, or a little bit of wine and all these little things.
And I love the focus on food. This is a very much a food movie as well.
Oh yeah, I know. I always get hungry when watching this movie.
The close up on the sausages, like, whew. Yeah. In the end, his suspicions are right.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and it turns out to totally be a helicopter that's been tailing him for his drug, habit. He thought it, not habit, but drug trade. He thought it was like over his like mafia stuff, and really it's because he's been doing drugs on the side.
Yeah, and Paulie had given him a warning right after he got into jail. He's like, don't do that. Don't do that. I don't want to end up in jail like this guy. Like, for Paulie, it's just like, that's the thing that gets people really fucked up. Yeah. Like, I can get out of jail easy. That's fine, but I'm not getting out if it becomes a drug problem.
Drugs are way more dangerous and volatile to deal in.
Betrays Paulie, gets admitted. Mm-hmm. He's scared out of his life because Paulie could kill him in jail.
Well, because he's not, exactly, and he's not protected anymore. As soon as Paulie turns his back on him, he's unemployed, essentially, after that happens.
And they get out, and like, he's still terrified because he's outside, and he's like, he feels like he could just be shot.
And the narration says he feels safest when he gets home, right?
Yeah, and then he looks for the fucking cocaine.
Yeah, when the police are searching his house, Karen just dumped it all.
This is also my second most quotable scene. Why'd you do that, Karen? He says Karen 90 times.
I know, and she's like, I'm sorry.
That's Hoey. They would have never found it.
I know.
I know it's dark, but it is also just the way he performs it is so, it's to the point where it's so iconic, where it's become a meme.
Yeah, well, I know.
They would have never. Like, it's kind of like They Massacred My Boy, where it's such a heartbreaking scene, but now we just use it as a meme.
Yeah, I know. That's the thing. It's like, but it is kind of like darkly funny because they're so full of shit. The way he says they never would have found it. It's like, oh, they would have found it. They would have.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
Of course.
And it's like, but he's like putting all of his worth on that. Where it's like, that was worth $60,000. When it's like,
but to him, is like,
that's not the problem.
To him, they're like fucked.
Exactly, and Yeah, then they end up having essentially no choice but to turn to the police.
Well, before that, it was because I do want to mention these last couple of scenes that are important.
Leading up to it.
He meets with Paulie because he has nothing.
Yeah.
And God, I love this scene because these are just two actors that are just fucking murdering it. Because in this scene, you get to like just feel the relationship these two have had over the years, over probably almost a decade, more than a decade, right? Yeah. Since he was a kid, he knew Paulie, and Paulie's just cooking sausages, and it cuts to a close-up of these fat-ass sausages. They're so big. It always gets me. I'm like, they're so big.
Scorsese's like, let's just get a shot of those.
But it adds I don't know, it adds to the feeling. I don't, like...
It feels like, you feel like you're there.
And Scorsese thinks about everything, so I can't tell you what it means, but I can tell you that it just feels alive.
Yeah.
The scene feels alive.
Like, food is a way that these people connected to, in a way. Mm-hmm. You know, it probably was like a psychological way to remind you of their time in prison. 100%.
And their time in prison when they're like, it wasn't like it for us wise guys. And they're cooking, they're just cooking the sauce.
Exactly what I'm getting at,
the thin fucking garlic slice that is just like, no one's ever been able to slice garlic that
the little
thin.
razor just...
I mean, Binging with Babish literally tried to do it in one of his videos.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there's a video where he tries to cook that dinner, and he's like, I tried to slice it, but it can't happen. Like, it's so hard. He gives him, like, a wad of cash. You don't know how much it is.
Well, he says in the narration it was like $3,000.
It was $3,000 for a lifetime.
Yeah.
Such a good line. And Paulie just tells him, he's like, now I gotta turn my back on you.
Yeah.
And such a good scene. I don't even know what to say.
Yeah, I mean it's heartbreaking, but it's like we all saw it coming.
But it's kind of like you disappointed your dad.
But exactly, that's the core of what it taps into and makes the scene effective. But like I said, like anyone, if you take a step outside of like, Henry Hill's narration, all this stuff, it's like of course it was gonna go that way. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's like that lifestyle is not sustainable.
You weren't gonna stop.
No.
There was no way you were gonna stop. And then, then there's that other scene that's really fucking iconic.
When he meets with Robert De Niro?
That final scene with Jimmy. He's like, so I arrived 15 minutes early, and Jimmy was already there.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, man. Yeah. And then right when Jimmy starts asking him, it's just like, listen, there's a guy over here that might talk. I don't know. You mind taking care of that for me?
Yeah.
And he's like,
Jimmy's in Florida.
Yeah, Jimmy's never asked me to go to Florida to kill a man by myself, and that's when I knew he was gonna...
I would not come back alive, basically.
I would not come back alive. And it cuts to him like
with the police.
Them talking about witness protection.
Yeah, he just knew he was cornered, and
it's like that freeze frame. That freeze frame gets me because it's such an easy tool, but it really makes you feel something when it freezes on Ray Liotta and it says, "I knew I wouldn't come back alive."
Yeah.
And the reason I say it's so effective is because that's when you're like, "Shit's over, man.
Yeah,
it's done."
The chapter's closed, and it stops in motion.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
The pacing of the movie, which has been going like a freight train, like I like to say a lot, but it literally stops in motion. That's a great way to describe it.
Yeah.
I love the scene when they're talking to the witness protection guy, which apparently that guy was the guy who represented Henry Hill.
Oh, no shit.
Yeah.
That's so funny. Okay.
Yeah, so he's the real guy.
That's crazy.
Is that wild? He's really good in the scene.
Yeah, I thought he was just an actor, but that might have been how he just really behaved.
But I love the scene. He's just like, wherever you take me, just not somewhere cold. And he's just like, well, it's not up to you. And then Karen Smoker's hair is like, he's bronchial, that's why.
With a cigarette in her mouth.
And the line that really makes me laugh is like, well, if he's legitimately bronchial, we'll try to figure something out. Yeah. It kills me. I'm just like, well, he's legitimately bronchial. That's why I couldn't believe that guy wasn't an actor.
Yeah. And after they go to that life, how Henry Hill's unapologetic. He doesn't have this reflection of like, I messed up and I'm going to do right. No, he's just like, he like acts like a victim.
Well, he wraps up the thesis of the movie, right? In that court, he was just like, we had everything. Like, we didn't have to pay taxes. We didn't have to do this. No lines. All like he doesn't say those exact words, but he's basically saying that he could do whatever they wanted. We owned the cops. Like we owned everything. Everything was for the taking, and now it's over. It just shows that suburban life that he's living in.
Him walking out to pick up newspaper.
Yeah, he's like, yesterday I ordered spaghetti, and they gave me noodles and ketchup.
Yeah.
And he just looks at the camera. And it's just like, you asshole, you got in witness protection, you're safe, and you're like, you don't get to have my life anymore.
Exactly, it's like you're the only one, you get the best case scenario out of this life.
Jimmy, Paulie, everyone's gone, Tommy's dead, you got to like live your life with your wife and kids in a suburb.
Until they divorce, but still, yeah.
And but like you just get to survive and live. And it is really funny. It's like, he just was like, man, I missed that life.
Yeah.
Fucking slam cuts to Joe Pesci shooting the camera.
Yeah. Do you know what that's a reference to, by the way?
The Great Train Robbery?
Yeah. Have you seen that, by the way? Have you watched it?
I've seen the shot.
Okay. Yeah. The whole, it's an interesting little, I don't know if you call it a short film, I guess.
Yeah, you could probably call it a short.
It's one of the earliest examples of, like, sequential filmmaking.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Because people were able to get video footage of, like, horses running and random little, frame, like, stop motion kind of style.
But putting together a small narrative.
Exactly. It was one of the earliest examples of that. And at the time it came out, it was, like, fucking crazy.
Yeah, I've heard people talk about that. It was just, like, it was terrifying for an audience to see, like, a train coming at you.
In a big screen, with fully lit.
Talk about Scorsese ending it with the most obvious music cue. I'm finding it. How he ends it, I Did It My Way.
Yeah, but with a punk cover of it, isn't it? Is it Sex Pistols that covered it? I didn't look into it.
Let me look it up.
It sounded like aggressively and violently British.
Oh yeah.
Like, I'm pretty sure it sounded like Sex Pistols.
Sid Vicious.
Okay, who was I believe he was the singer of Sex Pistols. So
yeah, and so it's noticeable.
Yeah, but the fact that like they had such, because punk music is obviously so like, outside of establishment kind of thing. So doing a song like My Way in that genre is really clever.
Yeah, and it's so funny. Like, it's so funny to me that like we're just, even up to the final music as the credits are rolling,
it's true to the story. Yeah,
it's true to the character. It's a brilliant movie. I don't think I've talked about this movie endlessly with you. We've talked about certain scenes, but it's because you hadn't seen it in a while. You and I haven't really had a deep conversation about it.
Yeah, we never really connected on it. At least the way we have tonight,
And I think that's why this podcast was so enjoyable for me, because I'm like, finally got to talk about Goodfellas with my friend.
I know. I was going to say, like, funny to wrap this up, like, I appreciate you pushing for this podcast, because it did reignite my appreciation for this movie.
You were nervous about it at first.
I was very nervous because I know this movie has such a big following. And I didn't want to go in looking like I wasn't prepared enough or wasn't knowledgeable enough to keep up with what you had to say about it.
But I'm sure there are audience members that are in your position that like saw it a couple times when they were younger and maybe didn't revisit it.
Yeah. Or
maybe have revisited recently and were like, oh wow. So I always try to look at it from that perspective. I'm just like, if at least one of us is super familiar, then I think we can like play both sides.
Yeah, but I like to think I made a pretty good effort to familiarize with myself, and
Yeah, dude, I think like this is just a peek behind the curtain a little bit, but we took a small break, and then in that break I was telling you, I'm just like, you and me are just like right here. Like the uncut gems point you made was terrifying because I was like, that's exactly what I was gonna bring up at that second. I'm like, yeah, we've been friends for a long time.
Hell yeah, man.
Okay, so is that a good place to wrap it up?
Yeah.
All right, guys, so thank you guys so much for watching, listening. Let us know if you enjoy this podcast. Let us know if we missed anything that you want to bring up in the comments section. This movie has so many sequences that we obviously couldn't hit all of them. But thank you so much for watching, and stay nice, dudes.